Hey everybody, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project. Just so you know, sorry I just keep doing this, while I'm driving. Like sometimes I just don't have, other time to do these kinds of videos. And it's just kind of complicated. All right, so anyway, just want to check and make sure that it's rolling, and it looks pretty good. All right, so I just wanted to kind of tell a story, and it's taken me about 2 weeks to kind of work this story out. It was just kind of like one of those profound moments that I think that you only get from nature and with your consciousness, with nature and nature's consciousness. So about 2 weeks ago, I had to go in town, and I have to drive kind of through the desert and through a canyon and all that. And there's a highway. I mean, it's not like a super main highway, but a highway that I have to jump onto to go through the canyon. And I don't know what time it was, but I noticed there was this huge bird that apparently, I mean, it looked dead, but it hadn't been hit again. It hadn't been mushed. And so I decided to pull off the road in a way that kind of shielded the bird from getting hit again, that would force drivers that are driving 80 miles an hour. Who the hell knows where these people are going? You think that the faster you go, the faster you're going to get there, or the faster things are going to change. It's like, I mean, this reality is the long haul reality. It is slow and lethargic. And so I think also there's consequences to not paying attention to what's on your path. And it saddens me that the animal value or nature is not an important thing, a reflection onto the human, as much as it should be. Anyway, so I pulled over, and I was kind of sort of close to the road in a way so that if people were humming down the highway, they would kind of move over and avoid me trying to get this big bird. Well, it turned out it was a young male. He was beautiful. He was large, red-tailed hawk. He was huge. And it looked like he was trying to eat some roadkill off the road, and something just struck him. And his head was turned all the way around, so it had broken his neck. And he still was, not completely rigid. Anyway, he was dead. He was definitely expired. So I just picked him up gently off the ground, and I thought a lot about Rudolf Steiner and just, Native American traditions and Native ways, and, my teachings, and talking about, birds are messengers between us and, the Creator. And that and that they bring certain types of messages. Their feathers also protect us. They're also protective medicine. And think about the butterfly effect or whatever, that the wings and the imprint of those energies and the change that it creates in the atmosphere or the air. The messages, that are changed and activated like codes like you putting a new software into your hard drive, your computer, or downloading an application. It's kind of like the same philosophy. And in Rudolf Steiner's work, he talks a lot about, there's, work, I think it might be in the Esoteric Science book, which is like 700 pages. I'd actually take a class through Steiner College, through biodynamic, blah, blah. It was like a 6-month course, and we only like went through like the front section of the book. It was pretty crazy. Anyway, one of the things that was discussed about was like kind of like the hierarchy, and because that Rudolf Steiner, pulled a lot of his information out of the Akasha records. And because he wasn't self-absorbed, like me, what about me? What about my lifetimes? What about this? He was able to extract a lot of information that goes back hundreds and thousands of years, that, kind of like, the human beings being put here, and that, it goes back to the Native American traditions too. I think that's why I love Steiner. Steiner is kind of a PhD, intellectual with, psychic abilities, but his stuff like totally correlates to Native traditions and Native tradition stories, and how you're supposed to live your life as a good human being. And in Steiner's work, he talks a lot about how basically the animal beings and animal spirits, birds and grass-eating animals and all this other stuff, had to agree to allow to bring the human being to this world to develop. And they each had to take on a certain percentage, and I'm just going to use the word karma, of the human being, because it was going to be such a difficult pathway for the human being to develop, and that the human being, because it would have a very, destructive ego, as it's kind of developing. And we can see that now, how destructive the ego is to our world. Anyway, so the birds are very much, in Steiner's tradition, in the native ways, that they bring medicines from, above, the creator, the messages coming in. They help assist us and activate shifting through their energy, using their feathers, for smudging and other kinds of medicines. They can actually help to wipe off and negate, negative energies. But Steiner, kind of also talked about like that the birds, so the councils, of agreement to bring the human beings here. And that's a lot of what the Native American storytelling tells us, that traditions and the teachings is that, the animals, would go to the creator, and the creator, they would have counsel about issues that were on the forefront that, mostly the human beings caused or were causing. Contractual agreements, if you will, renegotiation, or, voiding out these kinds of things, and making broader, decisions and guidelines and all kinds of different stuff. So anyway, so Rudolf Steiner talked about the birds having to take away they had to deal with the human being's mental karma. So your thoughts and the thoughts that lead you to certain activities, the mental projection of your pictures and images, And so the birds would collect them. But the only way that the animal gets rid of this karma is by dying. So it was just kind of a really sad thing, and and it was also, I really wanted to respect and honor this great bird. Beautiful, beautiful bird. So I picked him up and I just told him how grateful that I was that that I was honored by its work, with the human being, and that I'm sorry that human beings, absent-mindedness and self-righteousness, had taken your life. And I pulled him off. I just had a sense that I shouldn't remove him too far from the road where he was at. And I didn't know why. And so what happened is that I pulled him off the road and I found a big sagebrush that I could put him under. But then I felt even badder because there's like all this garbage on the side of the road, and there's all that garbage there, and I didn't have time to actually clean up the garbage. And so I placed him and I put tobacco prayers on him and just really thanked him for his work. And then I got in my car and drove away, and about, half a mile, I noticed that this bird, this other red-tailed hawk, was flying, and it was smaller, and I thought, oh my God, I think it's his mate. It's probably his mate, and she's going to have to raise, the babies, like probably on her own, because we're coming into that time frame. And then I came into the canyon, and she flew down where I could see her, and she flew with me through the canyon on the passenger window, and then she took off, and it was kind of like, thank you, because now she can go look at him and check him out. And she probably was stressed out that he was on the road, and she couldn't go investigate him to find out if he needed help, or to notify him that she was there, or to go try to get help for him. And it's just one of those moments in your life where there's just this deep gratitude from another being I felt so bad that I just couldn't do more. Anyway, and if you think that God isn't watching, you're fooling yourself, because you're being watched at every moment through his secret cameras that have eyeballs called birds, and you're under surveillance by the Creator. And I think that is more serious than being under surveillance by the government. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention today. It took me 2 weeks to kind of be able to actually talk about it. And the bird she was so grateful for what I did, and I just felt like I didn't do enough. I should have stayed and cleaned up all that garbage, and I should have made his, place a little bit more sacred, but I did the best I could. being right there on the highway with having people flying by you and honking at you and screaming and flipping you off and trying to make sure that the bird didn't have any more damage than it already had. And anyway, that's what I have. I'll talk to you later. Bye.